In Daniel chapter 9, Daniel prays to the Lord for answers about the prophecy of 70 years in Jeremiah. We looked at Jeremiah's prophecy of 70 years last week and found that in 606 BC, Jeremiah was given two prophecies of 70 years, one that takes place at the start of the timeline in ancient Babylon, and the other that occurs at the end of the timeline in Babylon the Great. However, in Daniel's time, they did not understand this. It says in Daniel verses 1 and 2 that in the first year of Darius, Daniel read about the prophecy of 70 years in Jeremiah and was confused and upset because he thought it had not been fulfilled. Scholars have debated over which year this occurred because they cannot find a King Darius who was the son of Ahasuerus and the seed of the Medes. However, the most common guess for who Darius the Mede represents in Daniel 9 is Darius the Great, whose reign began in 522 BC, which is 84 years after 606 BC. So it appears that 84 years had passed after Jeremiah was given the 70-year prophecy, and Daniel says his people were still far off in captivity, and Babylon had not been punished. So he prayed to the Lord in sackcloth and ashes, asking forgiveness because he believed the fulfillment didn't happen because they had sinned. Then the angel Gabriel came to Daniel and told him he was going to give him skill and understanding and advised him to consider the matter. Then he gave Daniel the prophecy of 70 weeks in verses 24 through 27. But before we go into this, there are two important things to keep in mind. First, after Gabriel gave all of this information to Daniel, he told him in chapter 12 that the words would be closed up and sealed until the time of the end, and that none of the wicked would understand. This means that these prophecies given to Daniel were never meant to be understood by Babylon itself. This is extremely important because Babylon does have their own interpretation of the Daniel prophecies, and especially Daniel 9, which are more commonly accepted by the majority. However, I've shown in other videos how we know for certain that those doctrines cannot be true, because most of them do not even use valid reasoning based on what the Bible actually says. And secondly, Babylon's more popular doctrines on this assume that Gabriel changed the prophecy of 70 years that the Lord gave to Jeremiah, telling Daniel that it was not 70 years but 70 weeks. This is not true. The actual Hebrew word in Jeremiah for years is word number 8141, which does not mean weeks. It means years or lifetimes. It's a different word than what's used in Daniel 9. And if it were true that Gabriel changed Jeremiah's prophecy, then that would discount everything Jeremiah said. So it's important to understand that Gabriel's prophecy of 70 weeks does not change the prophecy of 70 years that the Lord gave to Jeremiah. The prophecy of 70 weeks adds more information to the prophecy of 70 years, but they're not one and the same, as you'll see. Gabriel's answer to Daniel's prayer was the actual fulfillment of the prophecy of 70 years in Jeremiah 29, which we saw in the previous video. And in this video, we're going to look at the actual words used in the original text in Daniel 9, using 3 different concordances while also considering the context of what we already know about the overall prophetic timeline. Please understand that what you're about to see does not take away or add a single word to the original text. So let's get started. The prophecy begins in verse 24, and we'll start by reading the King James translation, which says, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins and to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and prophecy and to anoint the most holy. So we're going to look at this verse with all of the numbered Hebrew words from the concordance so you can be sure we're not adding or taking away any of the original words. The first word we're going to look at is the word translated as weeks. You can see this is word number 7620, which is the Hebrew word Shabuah, and it means 7. So we're going to put that here, 77. The next thing you'll notice is that the phrase upon thy people corresponds to only one Hebrew word, number 5971. This is because the ancient translators added filler words to make the text easier to read. That's okay, however, sometimes it can change the meaning in the wrong way. So we try to minimize the number of filler words and stick to the original words as much as possible in order to find the true meaning. Word number 5971 simply means people, not your people. And word 6944 means holy, not you're holy. You'll notice that none of the three concordances we're using here actually contain a Hebrew word meaning you or your in this phrase. Therefore, it was not appropriate to add the words thy, which meant your in King James time. Instead, it's more appropriate to translate this as the people and the holy city, not your people and your holy city, which changes the meaning. So, verse 1 can also be translated to say 77 are determined upon the people and upon the holy city to make an end of sins. The holy city, we're told later in the prophecy of Revelation 21, is a heavenly city. Therefore, we should not assume this refers to anything else. This prophecy is directly associated with the full end-time prophecy, which concerns the whole world, as stated in both Daniel and Jeremiah. In addition, it's clear that our world has not reached the end of sins or everlasting righteousness yet, so it would not be appropriate to assume these 77 were fulfilled in the past. This is clearly an event that has not yet occurred, an event in the end time. 77 that will finish with the end of sins and everlasting righteousness. Now, verse 25 in the King James translation says, "Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times." So the first thing we'll look at is the word translated as weeks, number 7620, which also means 7. So we'll add that here. Next, the word translated as 60, number 8346, means 60. So 60 and 2, or 62. And this next word translated as weeks, number 7620, also means Shavuot. So we'll add that here. And we can now see that verse 24 can also say that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah shall be 7, 7, and 62 Shavuots. So when we view this in the context of the overall timeline, and especially what we know about Jeremiah's final 70-year period, which could not start until after the rise of the 8th king in 1945, then it seems clear that the commandment to restore Jerusalem refers to the establishment of the country of Israel by the 8th king in 1948. But in order for this to be the true start of the final 77, it must include the fulfillment of the 7, 7, and 62 Shavuots to Messiah. So the first thing we must understand here is what Shavuot refers to. Shavuot is the Feast of Weeks, which is a Jewish holiday that occurs each spring. In 1948, the Jews observed Shavuot on June 13th and 14th, and this was 1 month after the country of Israel was officially declared on May 14th, 1948. Notice Gabriel said from the going forth of the commandment to restore. The commandment to restore by the 8th king took place in November 1947, but the going forth of that commandment did not occur until May 1948. So you can see the first Shavuot occurred in June 1948, then the 7th Shavuot from that occurred in 1955. The prophecy says 7, 7, so another 7 Shavuots from that lands in 1961. 62 Shavuots from May 1948 would end in 2009. After the going forth of the commandment, the first Shavuot was in June 1948. The 10th Shavuot from that was in the spring of 1957. The 20th was in 1967. The 30th in 1977. The 40th in 1987. The 50th in 1997. The 60th Shavuot was in 2007, and the 2 more Shavuots after that ended in the spring of 2009. So, who was this man called Messiah who showed up 7, 7, and 62 Shavuots after the going forth of the commandment to restore Jerusalem by the 8th king? First, let's understand what this word Messiah means. Many people think of Jesus, and I believe this prophecy did refer to the coming of Jesus in ancient times, as there was a partial fulfillment of this prophecy at that time. However, you may be surprised to know that the word Messiah only occurs 2 times in the Bible, both times in the Daniel 9 prophecy. So really, We only have these two scriptures in Daniel 9 as context for who this person refers to in the end time. And we know this prophecy occurs in the end time because we're told it relates to Jeremiah's 70 years, and Jeremiah's 70 years occur in the end time, specifically after 1945, as we saw in the previous video. In addition to this, in John 5:42 and 43, Jesus told the Pharisees, who were Babylonians by that time, that he came to them in his Father's name, and they did not receive him, but they would receive someone else in the future who will come in his own name. That word translated as if, number 1437, also means though. So this was most likely a firm statement, not a hypothetical. I come in my Father's name and you don't receive me, though another will come in his own name and you will receive him. So Jesus indicated that there would be someone in the future who the Babylonians will receive, someone who will be viewed as comparable to Jesus by the Babylonians. Babylon the Great is where we live now. It's sitting on the 8th king now. So who is this man that the Babylonians received and compared to Jesus? It was the man the world called Messiah in 2009, Barack Obama. He became president of the United States in 2009, 62 Shavuots after the going forth of the commandment to restore Jerusalem, and he was born in 1961, 14 Shavuots after the going forth of the commandment. That is, Obama was received by the world both 7/7/14 and 62 Shavuots after the going forth of the commandment. Another thing to keep in mind is that the book of Daniel is written in a kind of code language. The lion represented ancient Babylon, the bear represented Persia, and the goat represented Alexander the Great. So there's reason to believe that this word Messiah in Daniel 9 is not meant to be taken literally. It represents the person Gabriel referred to, and it represents the man Jesus referred to. The prophecy led to Jesus first, and Jesus indicated it refers to someone else, the man who will be received by Babylon in the end. To understand this in the context of the entire Daniel timeline, we can see that the location where this important end-time figure was received, the District of Columbia in the United States, is the actual location of the temple between the seas mentioned in Daniel 11. This is a very complex timeline explained in other videos. So this figure Babylon called Messiah was received by the world 7/7 and 62 Shavuots after the going forth of the commandment to restore Jerusalem by the 8th king. And verse 25 says that during this time, the street and the wall will be built again in troublous times. These were indeed troublous times for Jerusalem. War broke out in 1948 and has continued until the present day. Also during this time, Israel was building a wall. They began building the Israeli West Bank barrier in 1994 and continued building it through 2012. The word translated as street in this verse, number 7339, also means plaza, and this is interesting because during the Six-Day War of 1967, the Moroccan quarter of Jerusalem was demolished, its inhabitants expelled, and they built a plaza in its place adjoining the Western Wall. So from 1948 to 2009, the 62 Shavuot period, both a wall and a plaza were built in Israel as the prophecy states, but also several other significant events occurred throughout Babylon during this time. First and foremost, over 6 million Jews moved to the United States, and more specifically to New York City, which is the seat of the 8th king, the final beast. It is the location of the United Nations headquarters. It's also where the golden calf is on display as a symbol for Wall Street. This is interesting because Wall Street was rebuilt starting in 1949. After the stock market crash of 1929, the Dow Jones Industrial Average did not start to rise again until 1949. The point here is that the United States is in Bible prophecy. It's very likely the burnt mountain of Babylon. It is the location of the temple between the seas in Daniel 11, and even the position of the President of the United States is found elsewhere in the Daniel prophecy. But for now, at the very minimum, hopefully you can see that the fulfillment of Daniel 9 verse 25 connects Israel to the United States. And we're about to see more confirmation of that in the next verse. Verse 26 in the King James translation says, "And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined." We already know that the word translated as 60, number 8346, means 60, so after 62. And the word translated as weeks, number 7620, means Shavuot, so after 62 Shavuots. Then the phrase translated as be cut off corresponds to word number 3772, which also means make a covenant. So after 62 Shavuots, Messiah will make a covenant. The next word after make a covenant is word number 5971, which also means nation. So the nation of the prince that shall come. Next, we'll look at the word translated as destroy, number 7843. It also means go to ruin. So the nation of the prince that shall come will go to ruin. Then the word translated as city, number 5892, also means cities. So the nation and its cities. Then the word translated as sanctuary, number 6944, also means hallowed things. So it's cities and it's hallowed things. So verse 26 can also say, "And after 62 Shavuot shall Messiah make a covenant, and the nation of the prince that shall come shall go to ruin, and the cities and the hallowed things, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined." So after the 62 Shavuots, Obama won the Peace Prize in December 2009, and the reason stated for this win was his promotion of nuclear nonproliferation. This is a reference to the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty, which is a worldwide peace treaty initiated by the 8th King. There are several things to take note of concerning this treaty. It was first opened to signature in 1968, 7 years after Obama was born. Then in 1995, the nations agreed to extend the treaty indefinitely, and this occurred 2 sevens before Obama became president. Then 1 7 after Obama won the Peace Prize for his work on this treaty, a new version of this treaty was created by the nations. This new covenant is called the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. The mandate for this treaty was first adopted in December 2016, 7 years after Obama won the Peace Prize. The treaty itself was adopted in July 2017, opened for signature in September 2017, and entered into force on January 22nd, 2021. So keep this in mind as we read on. The next section of this verse mentions the nation of the prince that shall come, and that would seem to refer again to the United States. It says it will go to ruin, its cities and its hallowed things, and its end will be by a flood. So this mention of the flood here is important because this leads back into how this connects to the Jeremiah prophecy. Jeremiah's prophecy of 70 years end at the fall of Babylon the Great. And Babylon the Great, we're told in Revelation 18:21, will be destroyed by a great stone thrown down from heaven that will hit the sea. This is why Jeremiah 51:42 says Babylon will be covered by the waves. It's an asteroid that will hit the sea and destroy Babylon by tsunamis. So Daniel 9 is indicating here that the United States will be destroyed by this asteroid. And that's not surprising because we already learned in Jeremiah's prophecy that all of Babylon covering the whole world will be destroyed by the asteroid. But the timing of this event is slightly different in Daniel, as we'll see in the next verse. Verse 27 says in the King James translation, "And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate." So first, the word translated as week, number 7620, we also know means 7. So he will confirm the covenant for 1 7, and in the midst of the 7. But notice the word translated as 1, number 259, also means certain. This is important and you'll understand why later. So it can also say here, he will confirm the covenant certain 7. In other words, he will confirm the covenant in a certain 7 in the midst of the 7. Then the phrase, he shall cause the sacrifice, corresponds to word number 2077, which also means feasting. So it's important to realize that the Hebrew word for he or cause is not in the text here. So this does not say that a person will cause this. This is a very important fact because we know what causes the flood. It's the asteroid, not a person. So the King James added filler words that do not belong here. The original Hebrew goes straight from 7 to feasting. So it says, in the midst of the 7, the feasting. Then the word translated as oblation, number 4503, also means gifts. So the feasting and the gifts will cease. The next actual word is cease, and the word to was a filler word that does not apply. So it would be the feasting and the gifts will cease. And if you're still not convinced that Jesus warned us about lies in the Bible and Jeremiah himself warned that the Babylonian translators of the text would lie in Jeremiah 8:8, then you may be convinced when you see this next word. Because the word translated as overspreading, number 3671, does not mean overspreading at all. I checked all 3 concordances and not a single one mentions anything even remotely related to overspreading. The word means garment. And this is absolute proof that the text was not meant to be understood until the end. The mystery of the garment spotted by the flesh in Jude 1:23 has, as far as I know, never been understood by the church or even acknowledged by them at all. Even 10 years ago when I first decoded this chapter, I didn't notice this because I hadn't discovered the garment mystery yet either. This is extremely important because it shows again that the ancient scribes may have purposely buried the truth about the garment within the words of the text. They actually lied about the definition of this word. It does not mean overspreading. It means garment. So the garment of abominations. And this word translated as abominations, number 8251, also means detested thing. This makes sense because Jude told us that the garment is hated. Daniel is absolutely referencing this, the garment, the detested thing, as you'll see in a moment. Next, the phrase, he shall make it desolate, again, is not in the original Hebrew. The whole phrase corresponds to one word, number 8074, which means causing horror. So, detested thing causing horror. Then the phrase, even until the consummation, corresponds to one word also, number 3617, which also means completely destroyed. So verse 27 can also say, and he shall confirm the covenant with many in a certain 7, in the midst of the 7, and the feasting and the gifts will cease, and the garment, the detested thing causing horror, completely destroyed, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. This is absolutely phenomenal. The garment is a secret mystery within the Bible that a scribe intentionally buried in Daniel 9. It's the image of Revelation 13. It was the image of the serpent in Genesis 3. Revelation 13 tells us it was created using the mark they put in their right hand. In other words, it's made with microchips or microtechnology. The Bible says it's made with light. Satan disguised himself as an angel of light with this image. This is how Adam was deceived in the beginning. This goes very deep, but Daniel confirms here that it will be destroyed. This is the same thing we're told in Lamentations 2. The Lord will cast down the beauty, will kill all those pleasant to the eye in the tabernacle of the daughter of Zion. This is not about killing beautiful or pretty people. The fallen angels disguise themselves as beautiful people using this image. This is explained in other videos. The garment is what makes the fallen ones appear beautiful. The garment is hated because it's a deception, and it causes horror because while they can disguise themselves as angels, they can also disguise themselves as talking serpents, Genesis 3, or dead relatives, Revelation 3:4, or anything else that could terrify a person into submission. They've been scaring and manipulating humans for millennia with this image. So Daniel 9 is saying that the garment, the detested thing causing horror, will be completely destroyed at the end. So the man called Messiah appeared both 7, 7, and 62 Shavuots after the going forth of the commandment to restore Jerusalem. After the 62 Shavuots, he won the Peace Prize for promoting the worldwide peace treaty. And 7 years later, in 2016, the same year he was cut off, a new version of this covenant was created. So he won the Peace Prize immediately after the 62nd Shavuot and was clearly involved in creating the new covenant for 7 years, which was complete at the end of the 7 years. In other words, he was cut off at the same time the new covenant was created. This explains why this word in verse 26, number 3772, means both be cut off and make a covenant. Both things happened in 2016. And remember, this was not just Obama, this was also Biden who was involved in the creation of this new covenant. So it cannot be coincidence that this new covenant went into effect 2 days after Biden was inaugurated as president. So let's look again at what Gabriel said. Messiah will make this covenant, and the nation of the prince that shall come will go to ruin. Then it says, he will confirm the covenant with many in a certain 7. So it's now talking about the prince that shall come. The prince that shall come will confirm the covenant in a certain 7. Okay, so which 7 is the certain 7? All of this makes sense now that we know that there are literally 7 sevens in this entire recent fulfillment of this prophecy. So which one is the certain 7? Well, that becomes easy now that we're in the end time. Just like Gabriel told Daniel, it will not be understood until the end. We have to consider Jeremiah's 70 years, and they appear to have been accomplished in 2018. And 7 years after 2018 is 2025, and 2025 is exactly 77 after the going forth of the commandment in 1948. So this certain 7 appears to refer to the 7-year period after the accomplishment of Jeremiah's 70 years. So it says, the prince that shall come will confirm the covenant with many in the midst of that certain 7. And that is exactly what happened. The new covenant went into effect in the exact middle of the 7, 3.5 years after 2018 and 3.5 years before 2025. So this is not about the Antichrist. That's not what this is saying. Please click the upper corner for information on that false doctrine. Daniel 9 is pointing to the United States within a specific time period. That's what this is about. So if the 77 started in 1948, then it would end in 2025. That would mean the end of sins and everlasting righteousness would occur by 2025. And right now, in July 2021, that's only 3.5 years away. For more information, visit indigoflower.net. Thank you to those who make this work possible. If you value this information, please consider providing support. I hope you're doing well, and I'll talk to you again soon.